If you just clicked on this video, chances are you're trying to catch one of these. And believe me, I've caught a lot of them. So let me tell you how I do it. The first thing you're gonna need to catch these guys is a rod. Now for the rods, I would recommend some sort of heavier duty rod that you think could handle a fish. I personally like these ugly stick tiger rods. Believe me, these rods help me feel comfortable reeling in a giant fish and not worrying about my rod breaking. This one is the 7-foot ugly stick tiger Shakespeare tuna rod. There's a lot there. There you go. There's the description of it. Generally, you're gonna want a rod that can hold the weight of the weight you use to cast out with, as well as the bait, and feel comfortable slinging it out there and then catching the fish as well. With my rods, I want something a little bit heavier duty just to make sure that I catch the fish that I want and that they're not gonna break my rod in half while doing it. The next thing you're gonna want is your reel. With sturgeon setups, you're gonna want something you feel comfortable with using, as well as something that you're confident is not gonna break. Because trust me, these guys will break your rods if you're not careful, or your gear in general. But for the reel that I use, I go with the Penn Squall 30. Here it is. My reel's a little bit beaten since I've been using it for quite some time now, but that is the one. And it just goes on the rod like so. Here you have it on the rod, and that is gonna be held steady. You're gonna want it firmly attached so it doesn't go anywhere when you're trying to fight these fish. The next step is putting line on it. Now, obviously, my reel already has line on it, but if you're looking for good line, I recommend a heavier duty line. Something like 70+ pound braid is what I recommend. You can also go with very heavy monofilament line. Now for this one, I got this one on Amazon, and believe me, Amazon's a good place to get bulk, but sometimes you can't always trust the quality of fishing gear that you're getting on there. But this stuff seems to do the trick. This is about 150 pound, I believe, braid, and I did colorful braid because I felt like it, but you can do whatever you'd like. It's your setup, your rod, so go for what you want. The next step to your complete sturgeon fishing setup is the equipment itself, or what goes on your line. There's a few things to look for when you need to get your setups. One thing to note is that you have to be following your state regulations for sturgeon fishing, because sturgeon are protected in some places, and so you need to make sure you're following the local regulations and state laws so that way you're fishing legally. For my state where I'm at, there's a few things that are required. One, you have to have barbless hooks in order to fish for them. Two, your weight needs to be able to slide freely on the line attached to a swivel. For that, I have these swivels right here. Attached to the swivel, I use this monofilament line, like so. I'd attach it here to that. And at the end of that, I have a 8-ounce weight. You can throw different weight sizes depending on the current levels, depending on how deep it is. Honestly, it's user's preference for weight sizes. All said and done, it will look something like this. Once you have the weight and everything situated for your sturgeon fishing setup, next, you're gonna need your hook, your leader line, and your swivel attached to that. For me, I use the bigger J hook setup. You can also use circle hooks or octopus hooks, as some people call them, attached to a heavy braided line, attached to that swivel. Now, when it's all said and done, this is what your setup should look like of some sort. Now, obviously, my leader line is pretty close to the line that my weight is on, but when that's on the bottom, that weight will sit and that bait will kind of just float around the current. But you have your rod, your reel, your line, you have a sliding weight with a sliding swivel, with a lighter line than your main line for the breakaway weight. You have a leader, a swivel, and a hook. And that is all you need other than some bait on the end of your hook in order to catch these giants. Now, there's a few more things that I highly recommend you have when you go sturgeon fishing, but they're not required necessarily. The first thing I recommend is a very bright flashlight, or a few of them if you want. Generally, sturgeon bite better in the dark, so when I go out, I take a few bright flashlights with me in order for me to see my rods and for me to see the ground when I'm fighting these big fish. You don't want to slip and fall, that's for sure. The next thing I recommend having is some sort of bell. Now, yes, these things can get pretty annoying, and they'll make you jump when you hear them on your rods, but maybe you're sitting by the fire with your buddies, you're not really paying close attention to your rod, and you need something to tell you when you get a bite. These bells do a good job of warning you, and believe me, you're off your feet pretty quick when you hear one of these things, because you definitely don't want to lose your rod to one of these fish, because they are fast at pulling. The next thing I recommend you bring is some sort of pliers. Pliers are not only good for A, removing barbs if you only have barbed hooks, because you have to be barbless in some places. B, they can help get a hook out of a sturgeon's mouth. Not that it would be stuck since they're barbless hooks. C, they can help you cut line if they got line cutters on there when you're setting your setup up, but they're also just a great tool to keep with you in your fishing bag. Now this one is personally the biggest thing you need if you're asking me. That is a big fish tape measure. A lot of times for big fish stories, you need proof. Now with these, you can prove what the fish size was that you caught, and nobody can doubt you for it. And it makes a pretty good picture with this tape measure. Next, let's go ahead and talk about bait. For bait, my personal favorite thing to use is trout. A lot of times, the sturgeon I'm fishing for have trout swimming in the same body of water that they are. So if you're trying to catch big sturgeon, they're gonna want something natural. The natural thing for the sturgeon I fish for is trout. And so I tend to lean towards trout for bait. You can also get away with using things from the store like sturgeon candy, worms. You could even use any sort of frozen bait really. I've heard of people catching sturgeon on a lot of different baits. Trout is just my personal favorite and I've seen it work very well. Now the next thing you need is a spot. Spots are very hard to find a lot of times, but if you know me, I'll give you a spot or two. So if you're in my area, hit me up and I'll give you a good spot to go fish for these things. Now the next thing I recommend you have is waders. If it's cold outside, if you don't really want to get super wet when you're fishing for these things, bring some waders. If you have waders with you, you can get in the water, take your pictures, help the fish out, and then let them go and get back out completely dry. There's a lot more things you can bring with you sturgeon fishing, like a fire with wood, anything like that, drinks, food, you name it. All I'm saying is when you try sturgeon fishing with these things, you are gonna have a great time and you're gonna end up with fish like this, that, all of these fish. And if you get lucky, you'll end up with a big fish like this one. Feel free to check out my other videos where I actually am out sturgeon fishing and you might get some more tips, some more helpful tips and things like that. I'll put the link in those ones in the description of this video. But for now, that should be it. You should be able to go catch some big sturgeon. Obviously, you have to be in the right area to catch them. But I hope you have a lot of fun going out and fishing for these things. And make sure to drop a like on this video. It helps me out a ton, and I appreciate all of you. Thank you, and good luck out there.